Yes. Yeah, you're good to go.
Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren Hirose-Afshari. My pronouns are she, her. I'm really excited to just be here today and just speak to you all. When I met Fong a few months ago and just told me about what you guys do, I'm just really excited to be back in a college setting again. So it kind of like brings me PTSD, honestly, a little bit of the amount of times I've pulled all-nighters here and there. But I just kind of want to get a sense of the room. So how is everybody in here in the design program or studying graphic design here? Yeah. And then how many of you are in the program right now? Okay, cool. Nice. Congrats.
Thank you.
So, okay, cool. I just want to know who I was talking to for today. All right. Let me get this down. Okay. So just a little bit about me before I dive into, I guess my presentation today. This feels very weird for me, honestly. So I'm currently the art director here at Honey. I've been there for about a little over 3 years now, and I'm originally from Southern California. I'm from a little small area called San Gabriel, a lot of good Asian restaurants over there. And then I went to school in multiple places here and there. I'll kind of dive a little bit more into that, like in terms of my design education and just how, I've had a very interesting path getting here. And then, I love Shiba Inus. I have one myself. That's not her, it's someone else's Shiba Inu, but I like the picture for it. So, but that's just kind of me in like a smaller nutshell. Just been designing, doing a lot of like branding, identities, websites, and packaging overall throughout my career. And I worked with a lot of tech companies before, and then now kind of transitioned more into like food, beverage, agriculture, and also do some impact work with the state and like federal governments as well. So I'm kind of breaking up my presentation into like certain like sectors of my life, and also how that relates to you as you're, in your design education right now. You're going to be going through it all, through the gamut, and then come back out into the workforce. And that's like a whole nother cycle here and there. And it's an interesting one for sure. So like for me in particular, I was started in college, and I was actually at UC Davis for about a year, and I was studying graphic design there. And then kind of just realized over time as I was there, this wasn't the best fit for me. So then I decided I'm going to transfer and go to a community college and figure out what I'm going to do there. So I went back home to LA, went to community college at Pasadena City College, and decided I'm just going to knock out my G's, figure out what I want to do, like take all my graphic design basic courses before transferring to another school. So then when I was at my community college, I was taking a bunch of graphic design courses, and then I ended up in a course called rendering, which I thought was like Cinema 4D or some kind of Maya thing. It was not that. There was no computers to be found. It was all like markers and drawing, and I thought I was like in an art class again. But then what I realized is I was in an industrial design class that I didn't realize at the time was a thing. It's like designing of different products at the time. So then I fell into that world and just loved how that was about very logical, very much about solving problems, and very much focus on how do you think about function before aesthetics. Like graphic design can be subjective at times, where for a product it has to work. So I kind of love that approach about it. So I got into Cal State Long Beach thinking I was gonna do graphic design, and the first day I did was just marched right to the Department of Design and said, I'm switching my major. Well, sign me up. And then they told me none of your graphic design credits could transfer over because we're a completely different major. So you need to do 4 more years of school. And I was already in my 4th year of school already. So I was like, what am I doing? Like, is this really worth my time? But, I had been doing graphic design like on the side, and had been freelancing, in between to kind of like gain experience and learn more about the programs here and there. But this was something that, this was my education. I wanted to take charge, and it was worth the extra 4 years. So I decided to switch my major, did the whole program, went through the whole portfolio design experience and everything. And then right when I graduated, then I realized I don't want to do industrial design after all that. I kind of just realized, there's some kind of like segment in between that I fell into where I like doing graphics still, but I still wanted to help people and do services. And I still like the thinking of like human-centered design that can be applied. So it wasn't like, it was all not for sure. It was definitely just a roundabout way of getting to where I wanted to be. So I ended up switching over to graphic design. And then I didn't have UX design at the time when I was in school, because that term didn't really exist. So then I had to learn like what UX design was. So I took classes at General Assembly, did a certificate program there for UX design. I just remember my first paycheck from work just went directly to that tuition, because I was like, I need to put myself through it and figure it out. And then, yeah, I kind of just went out not knowing a lot of things, but I learned it all like on the job, which is really cool. And then I decided, I really want to work with tech clients. So I'm like, where else to go but the Bay Area? So I moved to the Bay Area, didn't know anybody except for like my 96-year-old grandfather at the time. I moved in with him to like, save up on rent, and then just kind of like, started applying, didn't know like who else I can really talk to and connect to, but I just kind of kept cold emailing, kept applying until I got a job. So I worked in the Bay Area at a PR place that worked with tech clients. So I was their in-house creative team for a few years, worked on a bunch of different branding projects and campaigns, and then went to a couple other agencies that also did the same thing before landing here at Honey. So I came to Honey about like right in the middle of the pandemic. So that was interesting of being onboarded remotely. It can be done. I've been through it. So that was really interesting. But overall, I switched industries again where I was in tech, and then moved to food and beverage afterwards. But I could still use the same applications and still the same skills from before. So that's kind of my own like creative journey, kind of going back and forth. I spent 7 years in school, like just one shy of a PhD basically. But it was definitely worth it, and it's worth the time and worth the journey. And I'm sure as you're going through your own design educations here, you're starting to kind of think like, what's the next step I should be taking? What are the right steps? And there really is no right step unless it's right for you. And it may feel like a setback, but that's you getting your own way in that way. So first point has a long way of saying that design and careers are non-linear. Even when you are in design, you're going through your design process of like researching and then sketching and ideating and then refining, and the beautiful concept comes out. And usually it's a professor telling you got to start over, or just like trash you in crit, or you get a client that's just like, you know what, I don't like this color, like you need to start over. It doesn't speak to me, and then you have to start over again. So it's this whole like wonky kind of roller coaster of things. But at the end of the day, as long as you're solving like the issue or the problem that was presented, like what did you come to me for? What was your need? Then that's the thing that's going to keep pushing you forward. And same thing in like your own design careers. It's like, what do I want out of this? What do I want to accomplish in my career? Like, it doesn't have to just be one thing. It could be multiple things, which is pretty cool. So, like you just kind of have to stay focused in that way. Just like, what is it that you want? And that kind of leads into your portfolio too. Like, you'll be graduating school and you'll have like a breadth of work you're going to show in your portfolio. And sometimes when now that I'm higher up, like I do a lot of interviews and talk to a lot of students who are applying, especially entry level. And there's sometimes I see like pieces of work where I'm like, so do you really care about like sustainability and your UX work in an app maybe? And they're like, not really, that was just my project. But I'm like, okay, then do you want to be doing that? They're like, no, that's just that I need projects to be put in it, So to me, it's like, I'd rather see work that represents you, even if it's not like 10 projects, just have it focused down to like, 3 or 4, for example, that tell me what you're interested in, what do you care about, so you're also just being very focused on like, what is it that interests you? Because then that's going to be something that when you're talking to a professional, like you're really into it because like all the things like the back of your hand, basically, of the subject matter, the things that you care about. Like if you want to be in packaging, then show me packaging work. If you didn't have a project that did packaging, then make one up, make a fun one. Like none of the designs have to be real, really. As long as it looks cool, you're solving the issue of what you saw as a gap in terms of the problem that you're trying to solve. And then you design around it, knowing who this item, this website, packaging project is for. That's going to tell me way more than you trying to, force your way of telling me what this project that you really didn't care about, but had to turn it in, is going to do. So it's going to speak more volumes if you can tell me about what is it that you like, what do you want to do, like, because that tells me as somebody who's hiring, like, okay, this person wants to be doing branding or doing this. So that's probably my best advice for them doing that. Oh, this is echoing here. And then lastly, about your portfolios is like, don't worry about trying to find your niche so much. Like, do you need to be like having all tech stuff or having all like food beverage things, and then you feel like you're being pigeonholed into something? Like, it's okay, like, to be exploring and be curious and kind of like, you know, figure out what you like and what you don't like, you know, like it's, you know, you'll learn in your career when you start working with different clients, like who, you know, like who, like it's more about who you're working with client-wise. Like, you can have good clients and bad clients, and they all come from different industries. So as long as you go in just knowing that you're going to be learning, you're going to be just like learning things and learning how to solve problems, and even like thinking outside the box. That's why people come to you, is to come for your ideas. Like, that's gonna like read a lot more than you trying to be like, I'm doing only like things in like sports design or something. Like, you want to diversify, like, you know, like if you diversify, that's not gonna be a hard knock on you at all. And even for me, like, I started doing tech things, but then I wanted to switch over to like packaging, but I didn't have a ton of packaging, but I was able to find projects that could apply to that, and then it still worked out here and there. So you'll learn. Don't worry. Like, everybody else, like, it's only you setting your own pace. You don't have to worry about what everyone else is doing. Everyone else's journey is going to be completely different. All right, so next part is talking about being or current state of things. So before it was becoming, just learning about past selves, how do you make space and build upon that for where you are now. And a lot of this too is like, I'm currently like here right now. Like, I've been in the industry for like 10 years, and things keep changing, and it's so different than when I first started. And a lot of this too is just like how the workplace has changed, how like design industry has changed since I first started. And yeah, when I first started, I was in industrial design, and that is definitely a way more male dominant field than it is in graphic design. And like, so I came up with a lot against that when I was in the program. Like, I did not look like a lot of people in my classroom, and definitely felt a lot of male energy for sure. And you know, it is what it is. And then even in design, like, you know, like, this room here is pretty diverse, and when you get to the workplace, you might not always see that, which is kind of discouraging when you're coming up and you want to see diversity, you want to see different ideas, and if you don't see that from like the bottom up, then you start to kind of feel like, oh, I can't be my true self. Like, I can't, you know, say certain things because people might not understand me, or I have to change the way how I talk because they're not going to understand what I mean here and there. So, but it's kind of strange because when you look at the consumer market, it's so diverse now. Like, I think is that by like 2045, most of the world's going to be more like multi-ethnic in race, and women are making 70 to 80% of like purchases like for their whole households here and there. Just seeing how like these different diverse voices are the ones driving the market. But if the there's no diversity in the workplace, then like, who is that really serving at the end of the day? So what happens is, like, when there's no representation at the top or at the people making those designs, you create designs that have no meaning. They don't have impact. They're convincing. They're forgettable. You know, they come out as tone deaf. They don't relate to different audiences because people that were in the drawing room don't have any of those shared lived experiences, and it starts to isolate consumers. And consumers are smart enough to know that they don't, like, these brands don't get me, and I can go somewhere else and find a brand that shares the same values as me. So that's something that is changing very slowly as people are coming up and starting to speak out more, starting to advocate, starting to, you know, represent different groups, and also just how other people are trying to just step down and let other people take the stage. And then when there is no representation in the workplace, there aren't places, safe places for you to like network or get mentored by people who have been through it. It's hard to like find that one person that you look up to, that like did everything that like you want to be doing, but they don't have that understanding that you might have of like this is my background, this is my upbringing, this is kind of where I'm currently at, then it's really hard for them to find that that sense of relationship with you. Even for me growing, into through my design industry, pretty much all my mentors were men, essentially, because unfortunately there just was not a lot of women I could talk to at the time, because I just never came in contact really with women, and I would have to go and search for those people. A lot of it was a lot of stalking on LinkedIn, cold messaging, or going to a lot of design talks like these and just talking to people, because that was the only time I could find somebody that was diverse that my school was bringing in. Sometimes at my workplace, it would be, people wouldn't look like me, or we didn't have the same background. So that's kind of what happens, is you kind of start working and feeling more to yourself and not wanting to branch out. So, but when you do have representation around in the workplace, things start to change. You can start feeling more comfortable, and and it starts to be felt within the design and the work that comes out. The work that you do has everyone's names on it within the company. So you might be working on one design, but it's going to be representing your team. It's going to be representing the people who approved it. It's going to be representing the whole company. So when you start working as small, it starts to radiate and starts to create a ripple effect. So when that happens and you have a design that actually gets it and is representative of the people that you're advertising for, that authenticity is felt, and that can't be you can't trick people to be for all these to have authenticity. And it starts to create this impactful change, because people start saying this is a different idea I've never seen before. I'm not seeing the same homogenous feeling or look that I've seen before. I'm not seeing the same stereotypical tropes as before. And then they start to feel it starts to provoke them and starts thinking differently. Oh, I feel seen, or this, designer product gets me because it's actually solving a need that I didn't realize I was missing here and there. So when you have that representation from the very beginning, and then having that get flowed out to the rest of the company, you see that in the work that's being put out. And then when there is representation, you can start bringing your whole self to work, to not have to be refrain and hold yourself back is I think a lot of people see that as a privilege, but it should just really be a human right to just come as you are and just bring in different ideas. We are creative people, so even more so to be yourself, because we're different than already just being so in the design field, being brain here and there. But when you can bring in your own ideas and your own experiences and just tell people this is what it is, and just have people listen and be open and just tell me more about that. Having inclusive language as well, you're bringing in ideas, or when you're trying to talk about certain ideas that can come and represent a client better. And then lastly, this is something that I wish I had when I was in school, is how do you find people that do what you're doing, and just even asking them questions okay, just give me the real deal, how does it actually work? How do you work your way up? Or is there any barriers that you don't necessarily learn in the classroom until you get to the workplace? What kind of politics should I be aware of? And just like I said, you can stalk them, you can go and go to meetings, go to things like Design Week, and just ask people for just hey, I would love to have a conversation with you for maybe 30 minutes. Can you keep it short too, because they don't have a lot of time, but can I get you coffee, or can we just do a Zoom chat, if they're not from here in the area? And more than likely they're willing to talk to you, surprisingly. They do read their emails here and there. They just might be slow to respond, but they're more than willing to answer your questions and give you details about what is it that you should do to get a job at a place like this, or what are things that I should be considering in my own current portfolio as I'm applying for jobs. And you can even do a portfolio review as well. Let's see, I have just not a full comprehensive thing, but just some list of directories and resources that afterwards this that can be shared, and you can click on those links. But just even just looking to see what are other people doing that I haven't really seen before, that I haven't learned about in the classroom necessarily, and even just outside my own peers, for sure. Like, you know, once you get outside of Sac State, you're going to be up against everybody else who's also applying for jobs. And what are other people doing? What are other, you know, creative people who are different than me doing, and what makes their work so unique and special, and what's the, like, what voice are they saying? So this is just kind of just a small list of many things out there of different resources, different, you know, communities that you can get involved in and join. You know, you can join it as a membership. You can find a Facebook group or Slack group you can join and ask those questions, and they're all like very safe spaces to do that. And, you know, just for reference too, like, I doing this more from like my own personal perspective. You know, I'm not the spokesman for representation for sure, but it's just kind of one take and one view that, you know, I encourage everybody to kind of just, you know, do your own research and kind of explore and kind of learn and educate about what representation means and how you can bring that and strengthen that as you go into the workplace. Okay, so lastly, beginning by ending with beginning, basically, kind of ironic in a way. But as you start to go into, you know, the workplace, and even if you're designing things now, like, I think one of the things you don't realize is how much power you have over the work that you create and put out into the world. And it sounds kind of like very like, ooh, that's like so serious, like, you know, like, who's actually going to actually see my work? But people do see your work, and they are impacted by what they see and how they feel as a result of it. So there is some sense of responsibility that you do have to take as a designer. If you're putting this out, how are you going to make people feel? How are you going to, you know, bring them in or isolate them? And like it's amazing how things like visuals can do that. So certain things to kind of think about is like, you know, as you're designing, you know, got to question, research, scrutinize, and even challenge everything that you're doing. Like, why is it that I'm designing it in this particular way? You know, what's my frame of reference? Is everything that I'm doing just based on looking at Pinterest? Like, is that my only sphere of finding things in the world? Like, no, the world's so big. Like, you can go to like a museum that feels different, or like go and sketch things out, or, you know, even go travel to different countries if you're able to kind of just see like what are other people doing. Even just thinking about like, how is my education? Like, what am I learning that's challenging me? Like in what I'm in school about, like, you know, you take things like art history or like design thinking, but like, you know, why is everything taught about like, oh, what good design has to be like Swiss design, for example? That's one example, you know, like, does everything have to be from a Eurocentric lens? Like, kind of have to start thinking like, why is it that way? Because there's other philosophies from like Eastern culture that do the same thing too. Why aren't we learning about that? So kind of just start thinking and questioning, like, you know, like, why is design from this lens? And like, is that really good design, or is that what I'm being taught or what I'm being told to do? And start kind of thinking that way. And, you know, and it starts to expand and loosen you up as you start looking for different research for things that you're inspired by, and just kind of just making sure that you're doing that due diligence in every step that you do before it gets to like someone's eyes to review. Because because somebody might be reviewing your work but not know that much, and they're just trusting your word that like, oh yeah, like you said it's from here, like, okay, cool. But then they find out later that it's like it means something else. So you're advocating every single idea because they're going to see it as your idea, and then they're going to sign off and it's going to have their name on it. And then also when you're designing is like, who are you advocating for? This was a lot of what I learned when I was doing industrial design, is very much thinking about your users and what's their, you know, persona, like what are they into, and, you know, what kind of brands do they interact with all day. But you kind of have like a mental picture of the type of people that you're trying to help or serve in whatever design project that you do. So this comes in a lot of different ways of, you know, like you might be working with people who might have like visual disabilities. So it's like, okay, if I'm going to be using certain colors, like, can they even see them at all? If I'm on a screen, are they going to be able to read what I'm trying to communicate? Like, because sometimes like we all love like neon colors, but also they make your eyes bleed. Like, and not everyone's going to be able to read that. You know, are you using language, you know, as you're writing copy, like that feels exclusive of a certain group? Like, are we not talking about collective we? We're only talking about exclusive them, for example. Trying to think of other things. Like for packaging, you're starting to think about materials. Like, if we're going to be doing, you know, cardboard with like a cutout, have plastic, like, is that actually, you know, going to be creating more waste here and there. So like you're creating ideas, but you have to be mindful of who's going to be using it at the end, because it might be cool to be designing things, and obviously you feel good when you can see it like on the shelf and someone's actually using it. But if someone doesn't feel like they can use it, it doesn't work, or they're just throwing it in the trash, then is it really successful at the end of the day? So that's why at the bottom, it's like design is more than just aesthetics. It has to work. It has to have a function. It has to serve a purpose, or else, you're just designing to design and you're just creating more noise and clutter. So if you're going to be designing, just be responsible of the type of work you're putting out there, and just start to think like, how is this going to be helping people? We're in the service industry as designers, like it's visual services. So, and people see visual things every day. So what's going to be worth someone's time to interact with it, see it in person, and just make it like, and have good results as a result of that. And then finally, just taking space, whether you're in a small classroom like this, in the workplace, and just own your design decisions. You're going to be coming in with fresh ideas. People are going to look to you for that, and they're going to be listening to you. So like with that time and moment that you have, how do you direct and influence anybody who is looking at your designs, who is listening to you? And also, a lot of it is like, you're going to have to be defending more than you are designing half the time. Like the client's not going to see you working up till, like, as we were talking about, 2 a.m. working on this. They're just going to see the design on here and think, oh yeah, that's easy. Just change the color. Like, that's fine. Like every time I've heard that, and just like smile and like not try to like twitch. It's been so hard. But you're going to be defending a lot of your designs for sure. So like, even taking that time to educate with people, like, oh, the reason why we're doing it this way is because it benefits the audience, or it achieves this goal, and using language like that. So you're kind of fighting subjectivity with objectivity is going to be very helpful, and like help educate and also further your own mission, basically, of creating more diverse and inclusive designs. So it's definitely not the faint of heart. It's easy to just be like, okay, yeah, like sure, I'll change it. But then if it's like, no, this is right because I've done the research, I've talked to people like that, and that are in need of this, and this is what they requested, and you're the advocate for your audience. Like sure, you worked together with clients, but they're not your end like client. It's the person who's going to be receiving and using your design. And then just like lastly, like it's a lot to digest and process. Like there's a lot of things to be taken into consideration, but at the end of the day, we all have our own pace. We have all of our own journeys. So it doesn't necessarily matter like where we start in this journey, but like when you start, it takes time to kind of put things into practice. It took me a long time to kind of realize, oh, I can, use my voice and start, like defending certain things, or I can start adding more to the table than I realized. Like I was quiet at the very beginning, and then I kind of realized over time, like actually, like, there's a lot of things I was questioning that were being said at the table or were not being said at the table. So that takes time, but once you start getting into it, then it's pretty hard to stop. So okay, so very shortly, I just kind of wanted to spend a little bit of time just talking about honey, since I'm coming from there, just kind of talk about a little bit what we do at our design studio. So like I said before, we focus a lot on food, beverage, and agriculture in particular. So that includes like wine, and it includes cannabis as well. So we're a small team of like, what are we now, like 12, 13 people. And it's half marketing people and half designers, which is pretty awesome because a lot of workplaces don't really have that structure. And especially as collaborative as Honey, usually it's, oh, marketing team works over here, gets everything done, and then tells design to do it. And like that's not the case like here at all. It's the marketing and design are always paired together in a project. We work together from like visual strategy, from like a brand creative strategy, and kind of like work together to make sure that every single aspect of the client's ask is hit. And that's very unusual. You don't see a lot of cross collaboration when you go to bigger places that work in silos. So this is actually like a really cool aspect of when you look for jobs out there. If you're paired with diverse teams, you start getting diverse results as a result of that. just brief overview of what we do. So we kind of work in these 4 buckets. We do a lot of positioning and naming. So clients will come to us and be like, hey, we get this product. We don't know what to call it. We have this name. It kind of sucks. Help us, because we think it gives the wrong idea. So we'll work with them and brainstorm a lot of times. And we actually do a lot of workshops where we actually will go to their, like their place of work. Like, hey, I don't understand like what you do. Like, what did we do the other day? We went down to like a fishery the other day in like Lodi, and it's a place that does like caviar and sturgeon. And I'm like, I don't know anything about sturgeon. So then we actually went down and learned how do they raise the fish, and like, how many like years does it take to grow a fish, and then kind of just get in the weeds of what they do in their day in, day out, so that we can be able to develop messaging, develop a branding that makes sense, that represents them fully, because we were able to at least spend at least one day in their shoes. So that's part of our process, is we go out there, we get our boots on, and we just go and like we didn't swim with the fish. I wish we did, but they're very expensive fish. Like, totally don't touch them. Yeah. So we also do campaigns, so that can range from just like social campaigns or like running traditional ads like billboards. So we've done that for the state a few times. Sometimes it's more like launching a campaign for a brand on social that they're announcing a new product. We've done those kinds of campaigns as well. And then probably what we're most known for is doing packaging. So we've done a lot of wine labels in particular. We've done coffee packaging. One of our current clients is New Rancho Tortilla. So we've done tortilla packaging and salsas, which is a really fun perk to have at the workplace. And then sometimes it'll extend beyond that, where it's like beyond the packaging. It'll be like, hey, we need like some type of box or device to like deliver this in, and then it grows beyond that. It becomes a trade booth, and then it becomes like all these different elements that you didn't think of that go into how a brand is seen in every single type of retail place or a store that you kind of don't realize until you're in it. And then lastly, we do some websites. So sometimes a brand will come to us being like, hey, I have a website, but it doesn't really work. Like, I need to sell things and I don't really understand how to do this, especially with COVID, since a lot of people were not able to like try things like in stores, or like even like samples. Like at Costco, you can like taste anything. So people just had to guess what the product tasted like, but then they didn't know how to order it. So that was definitely a challenge that we came across when we were working with different food companies and beverage companies. It's like, how do we get people to buy our products without tasting them? That was definitely a challenge that we worked on. So that's just kind of like a list of what we worked on. Some of the work that we've done, so this kind of all encompasses the services we did. So one brand we worked with was called Laid Back. They're based in Sacramento, but they're slowly starting to expand into like the West Coast and Northern California. Like started in Northern California, expanded to the West Coast. But they're a CBD sparkling water drink. You can buy them at like Grocery Outlet. You can buy it at Corey Brothers. Like, they're local. So we launched with them during the middle of the pandemic, which was also very interesting. And then, with them being in cannabis, there's a lot of different legal things of how do you sell like CBD products or cannabis online. It's, since California is relatively new to the cannabis game, there's like different rules of like how do you regulate and sell it online. So we learned a lot about that. And then we did the logo, we did the packaging. They were very much inspired by, like they came to us with a vision. Like, we have these flavors in mind that we're going to taste really good and pair well with cannabis oils. And they had a special place of Hawaii in their heart, but we also they originally were like, we want tiki stuff everywhere. And we're like, are you like Hawaiian? And they're like, no, we're not. So we're like, okay, let's not do anything that's like cultural appropriation. Like, that was like a no-go. So we decided to kind of go more like a textural layer. So playing with elements like floral elements that would allude to a tropical place. It doesn't have to be Hawaii, but it's a state of mind. And we have that layered onto the packaging like a can. So it's like transparent, because we want to talk about transparency as a company of where they source for CBD, like how much of it is from like a reliable source, just because there's a lot of different, like sources of marijuana that are not regulated so well. So making sure that whatever you're putting into your body is like, being regulated, and then doing like fun, kind of funky, like tropical themes and having like the waves. And we were able to work on their website and kind of create this like fun, like, I don't know, it's kind of zany kind of feel to it. And we were able to shoot some photography. We shot this in someone's backyard during COVID because we were limited to where we could go. But, you know, we kind of just hit the ground running and just like ran with the design, which was a lot of fun. Another client that we do, so very opposite end of this kind of weird zaniness, is we work with Sean Miner Wines. They're also based in Sacramento, but they sell all their wine nationally. So you can find them at like Rayleigh's, you can find them at Whole Foods. So they came to us for more content, social things, but then they actually were like, actually, we need to like refresh our packaging. So we worked with them and came up with a strategy of like different labels that felt, you know, within the same family, but still accomplish the goals of the brand. And so this is some of the label work we did. We shot a video with them, which was really cool, and went out to the vineyards to kind of help tell their story as just being a husband and wife brand and just working with local like vineyards. And then our most recent project was working on this like cool like label up there. So it's called Invited Series. So it's about like having wine be at the center of a conversation at the table. Like when you share a bottle of wine, you're usually sharing it with friends. So we decided to draw something that showed how wine is at the center of these different moments where you're entertaining, you're having a good time, and it looks like you're having a good time. So that was really fun. We got to draw and sketch and, you know, figure out how we're going to implement like some nice gold foil. This is a higher end type of wine, so we knew that like it had to feel special and look special. So that was something that we were really proud of, and we're slowly expanding that line with them like currently. And then like this is our tortilla client. So this is Mi Rancho. They're based in Elk Grove area. They started as a small grocery store in Oakland. It was a like mom and pop shop that now is just solely making tortillas and baking a honey, asking like, oh, we're trying to expand their products, but how do we, you know, change up the way how we talk about, you know, what we do? That we're kind of traditional, but we want to be able to relate to the modern day audiences. So we kind of worked with them how to speak about their brand, how they talk to each other. And then they asked us to help do packaging. So the outer corner ones, like that green one, the red one, are their pre-existing packaging. So they told us they kind of had to stay and look within that same family and not feel too much of a departure because they weren't ready for a full refresh. So we came up with this design to the lower right where we played a lot with colors. We have different elements and floral textures. It was inspired a lot by Talavera pottery. It's a very classic style pottery from Mexico that I really, you have to be like a craftsman and artisan to be able to make those types of work. And they kind of always talked about themselves as being craftsmen and artisans in terms of tortillas. It's very interesting. That's how they always like to talk about themselves. So we incorporated that and came out with two new packagings for, we call it better for you category. So anything that's like health benefits. So we did a gluten-free one and low carb. And then that kind of evolved and turned into more work as a result of that. They were like, hey, we have a passion project for salsas. It's all of our great grandmother's like original recipes that we wanted to share with everybody. It's, you know, like gonna be like really new and very different for us. Can you help us? So we were able to, you know, come up with a design that kind of expanded beyond that design language of this like healthy tortillas into something that felt more personal. And then we also looked at like the architecture of the building when they were on 7th Street in Oakland and made some of the design details of the label that of the shape of the building and had stories for each one and the different design language and reason for every single color that we picked. So that was a lot of fun to just, you know, create something that was personal, that was their personal story, and then just like run with it and just put it on a label. And they're like, oh my God, that's exactly what we wanted, which is what I never hear all the time. But and then lastly, like I said before, we also do like social, we also do campaigns for the state. So this is the one we did recently for forgot the name of the organization. It's like Business Housing Consumer Services. So they came to us because during COVID, a lot of people were at risk of getting evicted from their homes. They couldn't pay their mortgage or their rent, and their landlords are kicking them out. So, and then it also encompassed people who are unhoused as well. How do you, know what your rights are to stay within your homes and be safe? So then we came up with a campaign that's called Housing is Key. That was tied in, it was related to like Project Room Key, where homeless people were getting housed in like empty motels, empty hotel rooms. So we were coming up with different ways of how to bring the sense of like warmth in the time when it was really scary. So we came up with like all the messaging, all Californians deserve a place to call home, having different language, like different photography showcasing diverse faces, having that be, like encompassed by like this kind of house or key shape. It was like they're putting like a key through the door, but it could also be the shape of the house and surrounding it and making the person feel warmth and comforted. And then having different colors that, evoke warmth, but also just like optimism at the same time. So this was a campaign that we did with the governor, which was really cool. And yeah, it was really cool to just kind of see it go live and be able to create things that were actually helping people like stay inside stay in their homes and also be able to keep it as well. So I just want to close by just a statement we say a lot at Honey, and it's kind of like our tagline, we like empower passion. So we think about ourselves as like not necessarily for ourselves to like oh, we need to be passionate every day, but this is like what we strive to do whenever we interact with a client or anybody that is looking to us to like help them with their service or businesses. We want to do what we can so they feel invigorated and have passion for what they do. And like if we can get them to be excited about like, oh, this different business opportunities I never thought about before, like then we've done our job. And as designers, we are responsible for the work we do, but also we want to inspire and impact the people that we're working with to be, to be inspired to do better work for those in our community and for those who are trying to make the world, a better, inclusive place. So, yeah, so that's my talk. Thanks for listening. Yeah, I think just kind of, open this time to like just take questions or feel free to ask me anything, like anything design, like or related to the presentation or anything just random that's on the top of your mind. So yeah, go ahead.
What typeface did you use for these slides?
Actually, it's on Google, so it's instrument serif. It has some pretty awesome italics as well. That very fancy ampersand. I was like, oh, I got lucky there. And then sans serif, I was just like using work sans on this one. So yeah, it's a fun, tall typeface. It's on Google.
So with our current curriculum, reading this book that's talking about sort of a similar thing about bringing up voices and sort of not necessarily rejecting the Swiss design that we learned so far, but like focusing on more diverse voices. So for me, I'm happy that our curriculum is sort of orienting ourselves within like this new generation and bringing up awesome. Diverse voices. So I wanted to ask, like within the industry, are you sort of seeing that more so now, or is it still sort of like stagnated? I guess like what can we do to like sort of improve that?
Yeah, no, I'm seeing it and I'm feeling it for sure. Like I think a lot of conversations that were never brought up before are like common speak now. Like we always have to think and question everything we do, and is it we're not working for ourselves, we're working for the good of everybody else. And even when I'm interviewing people too, like those are actually very common questions that I'll get asked in interviews is like, what, like at any company, but I'll just use Honey, for example, like what is Honey doing to further the conversation, diversity, inclusion, equity, accessibility? So like, we're getting those questions too. And like, if we're not having any action behind our words, then like, what are we doing with our platform? So I'm definitely seeing it. I'm seeing other companies do it as well. Like seeing more and more slow leadership start to kind of change in like faces and experiences. Like it's slowly happening. It's just been a long time for sure. And even just the expectation of just the workplace now, like, it's definitely way more open than when I first started out. So it's happening. It's happening. Yeah.
What would you consider like a general timeline for doing research all the way to the end?
For like a packaging or
Yeah,
anything like that.
for like layback, like how
Mhm.
long was that like?
Let's see, how long was that one? That one probably was like maybe, it depends. Everybody has a different timeline and a lot of people want things done yesterday. So that one in particular was probably like 6 months total. Like they came to us like, this is our name, but we have no logo, we have no packaging. And we also want to launch it, and launching in the middle of COVID was definitely had its challenges, and also doing a website too. So I would say without the website, it probably took about 6 months of like, learning a little bit more about what they do, learning the landscape, doing maybe 2 to 3 rounds of design options and narrowing it down to get to the final logo. And then when we do packaging, like we're also working with a print vendor too, so we have to also be double checking with them, like, are my colors on my screen look exactly like what you're printing out, or how is this going to look on a can, and making those design decisions. So it can vary. Like I'd say like average about like you can have a project as short as 3 months to like 6 months, or I've been on projects that went on for 3 years. Like it kind of varies like on the type of work that you do. And what's fun about being at a studio agency is that you get a variety of different things. You can be working on like 3 projects at once, but they're all like so different. And then, but if you work in-house for like one brand, then you're working on that one brand only, but you're also working on like 5 other projects that are related to the brand. So there's pros and cons to each thing, but it depends on where you want to focus your time on. There's nothing wrong with either one as well. Every workplace is different. Everybody has their own pace and timeline. So just kind of whatever works for you. Yeah.
You mentioned like that. To like address clients when their desire and their like what they think is the best isn't like appropriate, or isn't truly what they want. They just don't know it yet. Or like,
Yeah.
how do you deal with a client and help them understand that there's a different way they could be doing something?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. And I've been in a lot of situations where we've had to have those talks with clients, just being like, hey, like totally understand like where your ideas are coming from, and I love the energy behind them. However, as we're doing more research about the current climate in terms of like our audiences, where are consumers, buying their products, how are they being influenced, and being mindful of just other cultures that are not your own. And, like that's something we have to be respectful of. Like some people, some different cultures, for example, like will have like a spiritual tie to it. And we're not trying to like take that and sell it and make money off of somebody else's culture. So we have those talks with people, like, they're like, so to me, I don't feel like they're uncomfortable. I'm just like, I'm just educating you that this is the reason why we're not going in this direction. And for the most, I don't think I've ever had a client say, no, I don't care, because then we probably like have already vetted them out from the beginning.
Yeah.
Like we probably would have already like flagged that before we even started working with them. But sometimes it's even like language like being used, like like, oh, they're trying to use like language about like even like colloquial sayings that we don't realize have some negative connotations to it, or like histories of oppression behind it. We're like, hey, like, I know you like love the saying, but this is like, these are the things that come with it, and we highly recommend to move away from that. And they're like, oh yeah, I didn't even know that, like thank you for educating me. So that's part of like our job as designers, to make sure that everything we do our due diligence and researching, and bring it to the client as soon as possible. And usually they're pretty receptive to that.
Yeah, it's a little bit kind of like an open-ended question, but what are some of your inspirations, and has there been anything or anyone that you feel like has played a role in the trajectory of your career? Where you've gotten to now?
Yeah, that's so hard. Yeah, because there's so many different people and artists that I look to that are not necessarily like graphic designers. Like even when I think about when I was a kid, like like my only frame of reference for design was just doing traditional painting and art, and like whatever books. My mom was an elementary school teacher, and during the summer she would bring me all the books from her library to the house. So I would read anything that she brought me. So I read a lot. Like I remember as a kid, I was like obsessed with like Georgia O'Keeffe as a kid. I was like, I want to be her, and like, you know, draw flowers that I didn't know what they meant at the time. And just like, you know, having like that like small frame of influence like is what really got me into it. And then as I kind of got, you know, older and started looking more outside of just different spheres, I'm like, oh, I'm not really relating to this. Like I'm definitely inspired a lot by Japanese art and architecture. So that that really influenced me a lot, especially as a design student. I looked at like Naoto Furusawa and like just other designers that had some interesting philosophies of how they approach design. It might not be the work that my work might not look like theirs, but I understood their ethos of how they design and approach things, and using natural materials, you know, like having forms make sense and not like be distracting. So like certain elements that I've learned from other designers of like how they approach things, not necessarily their style, is what really influenced me a lot. Trying to think if there's anybody nowadays that I'm looking to. I don't know right now. I feel like there's so much out there now because of the internet, like even things like Instagram, TikTok. I'm always getting fed different things now, but I'm always keeping an eye out of like who's doing something interesting or like, oh, I never thought about it that way. So it always kind of varies. Like there's not like one or, you know, one person I'm really quite looking at. I'm always building upon certain influences and references that really help like change the trajectory of like how I view things. So yeah.
You mentioned like cold emailing potential employers.
Mhm.
Is that something that you think students should be engaging in, or is that something to wait for until after graduation?
I think it doesn't matter like where you are. If you're just trying to learn, like it's mostly an informational type of interview where you're like, yeah, I'm really curious. Like I want to know what it's like to work at a place like this, or like, because for me, like I didn't necessarily get a lot of tours at graphic design firms, like unless like, you know, they were close by. So like, if it's somebody or a place that you're like, I'm curious, like nothing's stopping you really if you want to learn and learn now so that you can make that decision later on, like, okay, maybe I don't want to work here, or like, oh, maybe I don't want to work in like an agency like this. Maybe I want to work someplace smaller, or, you know, this is a little too much. So like, I don't think there's any limit to like when is the appropriate time. They'll know that it's probably just like you're curious and you want to learn, and or even if you just ask them to like, hey, my graphic design club would love a tour, like, you know, most places are open to doing that. So
We have a question for Zoom.
Mhm.
Alicia, she said, can you name some qualities you are looking for in an ideal junior graphic designer candidate?
Okay. I was like, I feel like we do this so much at every place I've gone to. I think the key things that I've seen consistently across the board is, are you willing to learn? Like being receptive to feedback, you know, being able to take what you can and apply it and even go beyond that in terms of like taking control of your own design journey, like having that proactiveness in yourself and investing in yourself. That's something that I see a lot in successful designers that have, you know, started as interns and are now like senior designers elsewhere. A lot of times I look at how you talk about your portfolio or the work and like telling me your process rather than just like showing me. You're telling me the story, you're taking the steps to actually explain things to me and like talk to me like I don't know anything. And then rather than just going straight into like the final design, like if you help me like, you know, understand and bring me into your world, then that tells me that you're going to be able to explain and successfully communicate your ideas to anybody you talk to. Because it's not very often that as junior designers you're in presenting your own design, but I've been at workplaces where our role is if you design it, you present it. It doesn't matter where like you are in the totem pole, like you get to design it and present it to the client, and it also helps establish like practice and like your confidence as well. So if you can be able to explain yourself like thoroughly, that's something I always look for. And then in terms of other aspects, like I'm looking for somebody who's going to not put their ego in the way and be like, my design's the best, like you can't tell me otherwise. You know, that kind of comes in with the feedback as well. And then also taking feedback from your team, because you're going to be in a very, like, I feel like this is something I didn't learn in college, is like from everything outside of college, everything is a group project, is what I've discovered. Everything is always talking to people, getting buy-in from people, having people actually do the role that they're supposed to do, and they don't show up, and like they still are like, you know, everybody gets the same grade because everyone has the same name. So the workplace is a group project, but just multiplied after that. So unless you're a freelancer, then that's fine. But yeah, so you're going to be collaborating a lot with different people and different minds, and just being open and receptive to ideas and not putting people down, but building them up. And then also, like, as junior designers, since you're like fresh out of school, like you're probably more up to date than a lot of people are in the workplace. So we're also looking to you for like, you know, interesting, new, fresh ideas that we, like, you know, we're so used to doing it our own way within the company. It's like, oh, I want to see what other energy you can bring that feels different. So that's something that we always look for and like talk about with designers. Like, tell me what you're into, and like, you know, how are you going to bring that into the workplace, or how are you going to infuse that into the work that we're doing and add energy? Like, we don't want to have the same, you know, type of designer. Like, we don't want a homogenous type of workplace where we only output the same type of look and style. We want to have people who can, you know, diversify and bring different ideas, because not every client's going to be the same, and not all the people at the workplace should be the same person either. Like, we want to have different minds, different experiences, different skill sets. So that's kind of what we look for when, you know, we have a junior designer apply. Yes. Yes, I see. Any other questions? Yeah.
Are most of Honey's clients like on retainer, or do you guys get new clientele like on
Mhm.
vacation?
It varies. So there are times, just for clarification, retainers, if you have a client for like a contract for X amount of like years or so, and like you just keep them, like you do as many hours for them per month. So it will vary. Like, we do have a couple of retainer clients where, you know, we'll consistently be doing work for them monthly. A lot of it will, most of our retainer clients will be those who have a lot of design asks, or rather than try to like, you know, message us every time they need something, we just put them on retainer. So a lot of times I'll include like packaging. It can include social, for example, like we do like content calendars, basically. It wasn't until I worked at a design agency, and I'm like, oh, people don't just organically just put up a post. Like, I didn't realize you have to do it like 2-3 months in advance. Like, and then you start realizing everything is calculated. And what am I doing? That's why I don't post on social anymore. I'm like, this is too much stress. And then, so we have some of those retainer clients, and then we also have ones that are just, we work with a lot of small businesses, so they just like come to us for like one ask or one need, and we'll have like a few projects going at the same time. But usually each person's probably working on like 3 or 4. Like, that's like a manageable load basically to like be working, and every project will start at a different timeline. So you won't be doing presentations like the same day for each one. Like, we'll kind of space them out in between. So it'll vary. I would say majority right now are just like one-off clients, and then we have like a couple, like 2 or 3 that are retainer. Yeah, and we're a small agency, so we can't do too many retainers. So yeah.
What are some like red flags in terms of during application and the process of like maybe?
Yeah, so definitely that will come up with, if you bring up the question of like, what is your company doing to like advance like opportunities for, you know, like for growth, whether it's, you know, DEI related or just advancing within the company and feeling mentorship and everything. And if they can't come up with like an answer that's like actually actionable, then you're like, okay, they're just like, you can't just say, oh, we celebrate holidays. Like, that's nothing. like, you know, like, it's just like, you're just like, oh, that's like, you just get icky like vibes like immediately. But if you ask them questions like, you know, like, how do you how do you use your platform to communicate to, you know, like a changing and ever so diverse community, and what actions are you taking? You know, are you, and then depending on their answer, you can kind of tell if like they're taking space or opportunities away from people, like based on like the speaking engagements they take. It's like, okay, like, you know, that could have gone to somebody else, or like, even if they have projects that you're like, hey, tell me more about this project. Like, you know, in your mind, kind of just listening and hearing from them, like, is this a project that like was completely right for you, or could that have gone to somebody else? Or like, how do you choose the types of partners you work with? Like, what was your process in picking those? And it's like, oh, we only hear from like friends of friends, but if you're not going out and doing your research of like, let me see who's doing what's out there and doing work, like you can kind of tell from the answers that they give, like, you know, if they really care or not, or they're really invested in their employees or the communities that they're involved in. So it's a good question that I recommend anybody who's applying to ask like your employer, because you don't want to get to a place and then feel like you're, you know, like you're being silenced. So, and it's a fair question. It's fair game now. So. Any other questions? Cool. If not, you're free to talk to me afterwards. You're free to connect with me. This is my email and also my handle on LinkedIn. If you just want to message me, I'll add you. Feel free to just send me any other questions that you might have, like after this talk. It could be related to today, it could not be. Like, I'm more than happy to just like talk to you more, you know, free for portfolio reviews. And yeah, so I just want to be open and available to you all, because this was definitely something I didn't have when I was in school. So I'm here as a resource, and I really want to see all of you succeed and just do awesome work. So thank you for spending your time.
Thanks, everybody. Oh, bye.